Hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Tom Shoup and I'm Editor-in-Chief at Government Executive Media Group. On behalf of Government Executive, it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's event, Retirement Readiness, Where Do You Stand? Before we get started, I'd like to note that events like this wouldn't be possible without the support of our underwriters, so I'd like to thank Long-Term Care Partners, the exclusive underwriter of today's event. After the discussion, Constance Sayers, President of Government Executive Media Group, and we'll sit down with Joan Melanson of Long-Term Care Partners to continue the conversation on retirement readiness. And in a few minutes, we'll be taking some questions from members of the audience. And you can continue to submit your questions during the course of the event by tweeting at us using the hashtag Retirement101. Now I'd like to introduce our guest, Tammy Flanagan. Tammy has spent 30 years helping federal employees get the most out of their retirement, first within government and now at the National Institute of Transition Planning, where she conducts seminars and workshops for federal employees who are thinking about their path to retirement. She also writes the weekly retirement planning column for GovExec092914, which happens to be one of our most popular features. Tammy, thanks very much for being here with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Tom, and thanks for the opportunity to write the column as well.
It's a great partnership that I hope will continue for a long time.
Me too.
Earlier this year, as part of that partnership, you helped us develop an assessment tool for employees thinking about retirement so that they could assess where they were in the process. And more than 16,000 people ended up taking the assessment. So my first question is, did that surprise you that the number was that high?
It did in a way surprise me to have that many people, sign on to take it. But on the other hand, you have to realize how many people are eligible to retire in federal service, which means a lot of people are thinking about it.
Are you seeing this? Are you seeing an increased interest as more and more employees get closer and closer to retirement?
I think it's been a steady interest. As long as I've been doing this, a lot of the agencies where I teach, they'll have waiting lists where people have been waiting sometimes for years to get to the right time to take this class. So there is a big interest. I think it's been going on for a long time. As we've come to call it, the retirement tsunami is kind of a slow roll of the wave, but it keeps coming and coming. We have a lot of employees interested.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the results of the assessment. So when we tallied everything up, 4% fell into the category of just getting started. 19% were what we called beyond the beginning, meaning they'd made some progress toward retirement. 38% are on their way, meaning they'd made some substantial progress. And 38% were in the category of retirement ready, meaning they'd really sort of gotten their act together. What did those results tell you?
Well, a couple of things. I think that the people who would have been inclined to take the test would have been people who are thinking about retirement. So seeing that there's a large majority of them that seem to feel that they're getting ready and based on the results seem to be getting well on their way to being ready really didn't surprise me. And I kind of designed the quiz, and I think the people who took it saw this, that it was kind of a common sense type thing. You could tell as you answered the questions if you were going to be ready or if you weren't going to be ready by the way you answered them. But I hope what people did was take it to really be an honest evaluation of their readiness so that they could see, well, I'm really kind of in between here, and that's the way they answered the question.
Overall, is it again an indication that people are really starting to think seriously about leaving government?
I do. I think it's on a lot of people's mind that they're planning to separate at some point in time. I think for some people it's a feeling of anticipation, like, wow, this has been working for this all my life and retirement's coming. And on the other hand, I think for some people it's a little bit of fear, a little intrepidation, saying, what am I getting myself into? I've never spent 8 hours a day with my spouse before, so there's a little fear involved as well. So I think it's not only the financial planning, but it's also the mental preparation that a lot of people have to work through before they feel like the time is really right.
So let's look at some of the categories. If people are just getting started, what's your advice? What should they focus on first?
Yeah, for new employees just coming into federal service, I think the important thing is to think about the what ifs. What if I do make this my career? What do I need to be doing now for my retirement in the future? And how much should I be saving in the thrift? What do I need to understand about the basic benefit? But there's also the what ifs, is what if I leave federal service? What do I take with me? What should I look for in that next career to make sure I still have a valuable benefit for my future retirement? Because government benefits are different from what you'll find in the private sector. So I think employees really need to think about all the different avenues life can take you on.
And it's never too early to start.
Never
right?
too early to start. Not like we used to say under the old system. You know, my uncle retired from civil service who did 30 days planning. He was 30 days before his 55th birthday. He put his papers in and he was retired for 34 years and quite comfortably. But today, retirement planning is a little bit longer process, and I think it's mostly because of the savings element and also the fact you're trying to coordinate Social Security, a pension, and savings. So there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about people at the mid-career stage. What are the most important things for them to focus on?
That's kind of the replanning time. When you get to mid-career, part of your retirement planning, you probably, hopefully already have some savings set aside, so you're reevaluating to see if you're on track for your future goal. You may have had some changes in your own personal life. You may have gotten married, you may have gotten divorced. In some cases, you may have even been widowed, and that changes your life's goals. You think, oh, I was planning to leave here, but now I may have to work longer, or maybe good fortune has fallen upon me and I don't have to work as long. So you kind of reevaluate where you are. But to me, it's an every 5-year process of keep reevaluating your timeline.
Now, what about that increasingly large group of people who are close to retirement and really thinking about what comes next? What's your best advice for them?
Yeah, those are the pre-retirees. I'd say those are the folks who are within 5 years of not only being eligible to retire, but really starting to think about a date, you know, saying, I'm really going to retire when I reach this age or when I qualify for this benefit. So at that point in your life, you want to start getting calculations done. You want to get a retirement estimate. You want to find out that all of your service history has followed you to this point in your career. You want to find out how much you're going to get from Social Security. You know, a lot of people still have this fear that Social Security is going broke, and although they may not have enough money to pay out the promised benefits, it's not going broke by any means. A lot of money is coming into Social Security, and most of our pre-retirees will get the benefit that's promised to them.
Great. You talked about this a little bit, about taking responsibility and for planning, and that it's somewhat of a more time-consuming and challenging process now. We're beginning to see more people retiring under the Federal Employees Retirement System.
Absolutely.
And certainly FERS requires people to take more initiative in terms of their planning. In your experience, are they showing that they're ready for retirement?
I think in some cases they're almost more than ready. I feel that, and this is my personal opinion, but I feel that the civil service system and the employees who are covered under the old system have almost given the FERS employees a little chip on their shoulder, because you'll hear people saying, oh man, I'm so glad I was hired before 1984. So it makes the FERS employees feel like, oh my goodness, I must be in an inferior system, when in fact they really aren't. So what that's done for them is to really encourage them that they need to save. And so I feel that the FERS employees, when they share with me what they have in their TSP accounts, and I look to see what their benefits and how much service they have, they're in better shape than they think. And many of them will have a very comfortable retirement, I'd say as comfortable as they would have had under the old system.
How important is it to be psychologically ready to retire in addition to being financially ready?
Yeah, as I get older and closer to my own retirement, I'm starting to realize how that psychological feeling of you want to have something to look forward to. And they always say that's important for our retirement years, that you don't want to just retire and sit on the back porch. So you have to kind of reinvent yourself. Sometimes the word they use today is rewiring instead of retiring. So you want to retire to something. And so you really should start working on that before you leave government service. And this whole idea of phased retirement might help people do that.
My advice to you is that you retire to column writing for
That's the
GovExec.
plan. That's the plan.
I wanted to ask you, too, before we go to some audience questions, about a topic that's been on a lot of people's minds recently, and that is phased retirement. OPM finally put out regulations on it, and so a lot of people are keenly interested in what comes next. Are you seeing this in your seminars, and what are on people's minds about it?
Yeah, we've been talking now about phased retirement since 2012 is when the law passed to allow for this to happen. So as I teach seminars, I'll tell the employees a little bit about what it's going to look like and how it's going to work. And I'll take a poll of the audience. I'll say, how many of you would be interested to kind of ease into retirement rather than just jumping in feet first. And there seems to be, I'd say 60% of the people I talk to seem to be very interested, to think that would be a wonderful way to retire. There's a little confusion about it now because, like I said, the law has been passed for 2 years. We're starting to hear the rules coming out from OPM as far as how it's actually going to work. And OPM is really now taking charge of getting the forms developed and the brochures and all the information that we'll need. But now the ball is in the agency's park. So now the agencies have to put out their written guidance. And each agency has their own discretion as far as any time limits, which employees will be offered phased retirement. If you want to come out of it and go back to full-time, how's that going to work? So there's a lot of work the agencies are now doing, and hopefully they're meeting to discuss these rules that they're going to put out to their employees. So at this point today, nobody can do phased retirement yet because the agencies have yet to spell that out. And what is mentoring? So there's a lot of about 9 different things the agencies really have to set forward before the employees can sign up. And I think some employees are going to find out not everyone's going to be offered the opportunity.
And just because agencies can offer it starting next month,
right,
doesn't mean they necessarily will.
Right, yeah. We're hearing, and this is rumor mill, but you hear a lot of talk when you go into different agencies that it may not be till 2015 or even later before they really get this firmed up. And I think that's smart in some respect, because once you ring that bell, it's hard to unring it to say, oh, wait a second, we allowed this to happen too soon. We really didn't think it through. So I think it's smart of the agencies to really see how this is going to work for us, because it has to benefit not only the employee who wants to ease into retirement, but there has to be something in it for the agency to benefit from allowing some of their senior employees who have a lot of wealth of experience to pass that experience on to the next generation who's going to step in and take their place. So if they can see that as a plus, I think we'll see more agencies doing it.
And you mentioned the mentoring requirement in the regulations,
part of the law.
Right?
Yes, exactly.
Are there other requirements that people should be aware of?
Yeah, there are some things we do know. Regardless of what the agencies do and how they implement it, we know that there's some employees just by law will not be able to do it. And that's anybody subject to mandatory retirement. So if you're in a covered law enforcement position, federal law enforcement officer, or a firefighter, or air traffic controller, these employees won't be allowed to do it anyway. Same thing with employees who work in a regular schedule, like a nurse at the VA. Nurses won't be eligible because of their schedule. So we know that by law, some employees will be left out of the opportunity. And also we know that you have to work 40 hours per pay period. Because I had one guy say, wouldn't it be nice if I could just work 6 months and then take 6 months off? Well, you might be able to do that, but not in phased retirement. So phased retirees will have to have a regular schedule every 2 weeks. They're still employees, although they're still retirees too, so they're half and half.
Yes. As nice as it would be to be able to disappear for 6 months.
That's right.
That's not in the
They
cards.
might not come back.
Let's turn to some of the questions that have come in from audience members. Some people submitted questions in advance, and we're taking questions again via Twitter with the hashtag retirement101. Okay, to start with, here's one, someone who says, my husband and I are both federal employees. I carry family FEHBP insurance, and my husband is covered under my plan. We also have a son who is 23 who is covered under my insurance, so I need to keep family coverage until he turns 26.
That's right.
If I don't leave my husband a survivor annuity and I die before him, will he be able to pick up FEHBP insurance upon my death?
Okay. Yeah, we have a lot of, I meet a lot of federal couples where the husband and wife are both government employees, and one of the two, especially if there's children involved, one of the two will carry self and family coverage. But everybody's covered. So I think what this writer is worried about is there's this 5-year requirement that you have to be enrolled in federal health benefits for the 5 years before you retire to be able to carry that benefit for the rest of your life. And both this husband and wife meet that test. He meets it because he's under her family plan. She meets it, of course, because she's carrying the coverage. So if something happened to her where she happened to predecease him after she retires, he can still pick up the coverage because I'm assuming he's going to retire himself. The only caution would be if he resigned and then she was the only one to retire. But it sounds like they're both career federal employees, so it shouldn't be an issue.
Here's a follow-up from the same person on that issue of both members of the couple being federal employees. What recommendation do you give couples who are both federal employees so their retirement income is not negatively impacted upon the death of one of them, especially in the first 10 years after their retirement? Do you recommend a life insurance policy? If so, what kind?
Yeah. I'm kind of surprised by the part about the 10-year qualifier. It's like, well, what happens after 10 years? You no longer need money. But anyway, so when you have a married couple who both work, and it doesn't matter if they're both government employees or one works in private industry, one's federal, if you both work and you both have earned your own retirement benefits, you might tend to think, well, heck, I could just retire on my own income, and he's on his own, he could retire on his. But you have to remember that when you're together living in retirement, you might get used to all that income. You know, you got your pension, I've got mine, we have our savings, we have Social Security. So you really have to ask each other the question, what happens if I go first and my Social Security stops and my government pension stops? Can you live on your own Social Security and your own government pension or your own private sector pension along with our savings? And in many cases, you need to consider survivor benefits for each other. The nice thing is that when you elect a government survivor benefit for your spouse, if your spouse dies first, you can stop paying for it. You can restore your retirement back up to the unreduced amount. So the risk is very small, but the benefit is that if you die first, your spouse has a lifetime income to help replace some of that income they lost when you passed away. So I do encourage employees, even if you both have your own retirement, to really give that serious thought, because that's one of those elections we call a permanent reduction to your retirement. So you can't change your mind 10 years later to say, oh my goodness, you know, this life insurance policy ran out and we still need money 10 years later. Mm-hmm. So the thing I have against life insurance is you don't know how much you need. You don't know how long you're going to live, you don't know how long your spouse is going to outlive you, and you don't know what inflation is going to do over your lifetime. So the benefit of the government survivor benefit is it's indexed for inflation, it's a lifetime benefit. No risk, little risk.
Yes. Well, I can see why some people tend to avoid the subject of retirement planning since it involves
all these ifs,
contemplating things like
this. Right.
Here's another question. I had withdrawn my retirement money when I was young and then re-entered the government back into the civil service retirement system. The amount withdrawn was not much, but it has grown to be $5,400 or so. I started making small payments to the Office of Personnel Management on this, but I was wondering if it is cost effective to pay this off or not.
Yeah, so we have a lot of times employees will find that they have an unpaid deposit. Now in this case, this is a redeposit. This is where she or he took a refund of their retirement contributions. Now they're starting to pay the money back. So the question is, number one, how much do I owe? And so this person already found out that their original refund has grown with interest, because the longer you wait to pay the money back, the more interest that accumulates. So now they're trying to figure out, is it worth paying? So to know whether or not you should pay back or not pay back, because it's always optional, I would recommend that you have your retirement computed both ways. So what happens if I pay it back? How much would my retirement benefit be? How much would it be if I don't pay it back? Because in some cases it makes perfect sense to pay those off. And depending on which retirement system you're under and when you took that refund or when you owe that deposit, in some cases it may not make 6 of one, half a dozen of the other difference. So you really have to look at it individually, because there's differences between CSRS and FERS. There's also differences whether it was a military deposit or a refunded contribution deposit or even just a seasonal job with the Park Service that you're trying to get credit for. So really check with your benefits office and work with HR to get the answer to that.
All right. A follow-up to that question, what are your thoughts on the program to put voluntary savings into CSRS?
Okay. Yeah, this is a program called voluntary contributions, which a lot of people, even those under the civil service system, have not heard of. One thing to tell you for sure, it's only available to people under CSRS. So if you're listening and you're under FERS, you wouldn't be able to make these voluntary contributions. But if you're under the civil service retirement system, you can make additional contributions to the retirement fund over and above the money that comes out of your paycheck automatically that goes into civil service. Now the reason why people do this for the most part is it's a backdoor into an IRA. So if you put the money into a qualified retirement plan or into the retirement fund, then you can take those funds and transfer them into an individual retirement arrangement. And that could be a traditional IRA or even a Roth IRA. Now you can do that anyway. You know, many people can put money into an IRA, but there's limitations of how much and whether you make too much money to do it. So with this plan, you can put in as much as 10% of your lifetime salary, which for some long-time feds could be a six-figure number. So if you have that laying around somewhere and you want to put $100,000 into an IRA, this would be a way to make it happen all at once. So there's a lot to it. There's some tax issues you want to be aware of. You can do it while you're employed and earn interest on the money while it sits there, but at the time of retirement you have to decide to withdraw the money, otherwise it converts to an annuity and it takes a lot longer to get it back that way. So it's something that there's a lot of information out there on it. In fact, we've written about it many times in the weekly column. You can look up in the index and you'll find at least 2 or 3 articles we wrote about voluntary contributions.
Great. Here's a question that asked you to go into the dangerous territory of predicting what Congress might do. There have been numerous proposals to change the cost of living formula for federal retirees to a less generous formula. Those of us nearing retirement have made retirement decisions based on the current formula with the belief that it would not be changed at the 11th hour as we approach or enter retirement. I understand that such a change is entirely within the hands of Congress, but I would appreciate your perspective on the fairness of such a change and whether it is likely that the current and soon-to-be retirees would be grandfathered under the current formula.
Yeah, I think there's nothing that strikes fear into the heart of a retiree than saying something's going to change. And the only 2 things that can really be changed once you have retired would be the COLA adjustment, the retirement COLA, or the way that you pay for health insurance, because those are things that are not set at the time you leave. So I can understand the fear, the reservation about that. But on the other hand, Congress has a hard time making those changes because they have to get approval from all of Congress and they have to work against the lobbyists who are trying to protect these benefits. So over the 30 years that I have been watching the changes that Congress has made, I would have to say the changes have been more positive than negative if you think back and look back over the years. Although we've seen a lot of negative proposals, including changing the COLA, those are very hard to get through. So luckily there's a lot of people out there trying to protect federal benefits.
Yeah, there has been a certain amount of change in recent years, more so than there had been before.
Yeah, the worst thing that's happened lately was the pay freeze. And that was pretty bad. But other than that, the retirement benefit for current employees has not changed since FERS was implemented in '87. Now new hires, people coming on board last year and this year, have to pay more money into the retirement fund, but that new contribution rate didn't affect current employees who are already on board.
Yeah,
so.
And history suggests, doesn't it, that when changes are made that really affect benefits, they're more likely to affect new hires than people currently in the system.
Exactly. Any change to the way the retirement's computed, eligibility, most of those will affect new hires rather than people who had been counting on that benefit for many years. But like I said, COLA adjustments, those can change after retirement, and so can the way we pay for health benefits.
Yeah. Okay, here's one that's a bit of a brain teaser. First, the facts. There's a husband and wife, both now 63 years old. January and August birthdays. Both will have approximately the same Social Security benefit, and both will continue to work until about age 70. So the question is, at age 66, can the husband apply for Social Security in January, then suspend it, and the other spouse draw a spousal benefit of 1/2 without reduction for working? Then in August, could the wife apply and suspend, and the husband draw a spouse benefit of 1/2 without reduction for working? All of this would happen until they turn 70, at which time they'll start receiving full benefits on their own account. Would there be any reduction in benefits?
That's a tongue teaser. Yeah, I think what the writer is asking about is that there's a provision in Social Security that allows you to file for benefits and suspend receiving them so that your spouse can claim 1/2 of yours. And that way they can delay their own till 70 and get a big bonus. There's a 24 to 32% increase if you wait till you're 70 to claim your benefit. So what they're wanting to do is they want each one of them to claim spousal on each other and delay their own to 70. And the problem is you can't do that. One of you can. So I would say the one who has the smaller benefit should claim the spousal amount and then let them both delay till 70, and then at 70 they both claim their own. The only drawback or the only caution I would have to say is that Social Security was designed actuarially. And so if we all died at 81, it wouldn't matter if you took it at 62 or wait till you're 70, we'd all get the same amount of money. So if you're going to delay your benefit till 70, that tells you you better hope you do what?
Live a long time.
Live a long time, that's right. So at least past 81, and then you might have made some money on that whole strategy.
All right. Well, I think you did a good job with the brain teaser.
I tried.
Here's one. The most confusing area I'm dealing with is computing tax withholding. I don't want to pay too much, but don't want to have too little taken out. Any tips you can provide?
Yeah, well, I'm not a tax expert, but I've certainly been around enough of them. And I hear what they recommend for the employees who are getting ready to retire. So one of the tips would be to practice retirement income before you actually retire. So do your tax return knowing the estimate of what your benefit's going to be, your Social Security, how much you might be withdrawing from your TSP, and you can run that through one of the tax programs or work it through with your tax preparer so that you have a better idea of what to expect your withholding should be. The other thing is it's not set in stone. So once you elect a withholding, if you're not taking out enough, then you adjust it next year. Or if you're taking out too much, you can maybe cut back on it the following year. So it's really no different than we elect our withholding from our paycheck. It's just now we have retirement income that's taxed pretty much the same way as our salary was. So it's just learning the rules. And there's a lot of tax guides on the IRS website to help federal retirees plan for retirement. Probably the most common one is IRS Publication 721. It's the guide to civil service benefits, which includes FERS and TSP and CSRS.
Okay.
So lots of help on taxes out there.
Speaking of TSP, there's obviously a lot of interest in thrift savings plan and how to work with it. Here's someone who asked, what are the 3 components of the TSP and when can I start to receive monthly checks after retirement?
Yeah, so the withdrawal options from the thrift savings plan are pretty varied. I always tell employees that you have as much control over taking money out of the thrift as you had putting it in. So the withdrawal choices that the TSP offers is basically 4 things. The first thing you can do is request a partial distribution. This allows someone who has recently retired to take just a chunk of money out of the TSP and either use it to pay for some expense that has come up or even to transfer some or all of that money to an IRA so they can have it reinvested and diversify it and have it available as they need it. Now when you come to take a full withdrawal from the TSP, you can do another lump sum payment. You can also do a monthly check where you can tell them how much you want to receive every month and just deplete your account slowly. Or you can purchase a TSP annuity. And without getting into too many details on how these all work, I would suggest going to the thrift plan website, tsp.gov, and right dead center on the home page you see a little icon that says calculators, and they have a retirement income calculator that compares all of those options based on how much you have in the thrift, based on your age, and based on whether or not someone else is depending on your income. So you can run the estimate of what the annuity would play out, what the monthly payment would end, when you run out of money, and also if you deplete part of the balance, how that would affect your future. So it's some very nice user-friendly tools there for people to use.
Great. The TSP's been around for a while now. And some
27
people,
years.
Yeah, have been investing for that whole time. In fact, once or twice you've written about
The
TSP millionaires and
right.
how to make $1 million in your TSP. Are people getting better at using TSP as an element of their retirement plan?
Yeah, some are really gangbusters at it. Like I said, there are people who have really understood the risk assessment of their own risk tolerance. They've understood really what it means to manage an investment for the long term rather than looking at the day-to-day returns. And these are the people who have done very well and who can afford to put the money into it. But I also want to at the same time tell people who aren't as high of a salary. You have some people who work their whole career making no more than $50,000 a year. They're out in the Midwest someplace, and they're able to make ends meet. And for them, if they don't have anywhere near even $500,000, it's okay, because I put Social Security in the TSP almost on a seesaw. So people who are at the lower end of the pay scale will get a higher replacement of income from Social Security. But on the other hand, people who are at the higher end of the pay scale, those are the ones who really need to save and invest. So if the higher wage earners aren't understanding how to invest or manage their savings, they'll be at the most disadvantage by not understanding it. So I think it does pay to take the time to learn about it.
Mm-hmm. Here's another question about CSRS. Does a CSRS employee max out on the percentage of the high 3 average salary he or she will receive? For example, I've always heard that a CSRS employee will max out at 80% after approximately 42 years of service. What if an employee has 44 years of service? Would he or she receive 84% of the high 3, or is it maxed at 80%?
Yeah, see, under the old system, as we call it, civil service retirement, there is a maximum benefit. And as you pointed out there, it's 41 years and 11 months for most full-time employees. Now, if somebody worked part-time, it may take a little longer to reach that. But for most people, it's almost 42 years. So if you did work beyond that, you worked 44 years, or I've even seen people stay 50 or 60 years, you've overpaid into the retirement fund. So every 2 weeks, the withholding for civil service is 7%. So the amount that you've overpaid gets refunded to you because you are limited to 80%. However, sick leave can add up to that. So if somebody had 42 years of service and had saved up a year of sick leave, then that sick leave would be another year or another 2%. So the sick leave can take you above 80%. And by the way, there's no limit on FERS. So to get 100% under FERS, however, you would have to work 100 years. So I don't think Congress was worried about that. But it is possible for a FERS employee to have maybe 40% from their FERS benefit, maybe another 30 or 40% coming from Social Security, and then they still have the TSP that can add perhaps another 30%. So I think FERS employees, sooner than they would think, might reach that 100% level if they work at it.
I think some of them only feel like they would have to work 100 years
That's
in order
right.
to be able to retire. This is a CSRS FERS combination question.
Okay.
I was hired into the federal government in October 1986. The retirement block on Form SF50 lists Code C, FICA, and CSRS.
Right.
On January 1st, 1987, the retirement code on my SF50 changed to a code for FERS. Does this mean I was not covered under FERS for October, November, and December of 1986? I was planning on retiring at the end of October 2019 with 33 years of service.
Yeah, so there's a lot of federal employees who were first brought on board in 1984, 85, and 86. And the law that changed Social Security in 1983 said that all new hires had to pay into Social Security starting January 1st of 84. But Congress didn't have FERS ready yet. So the FERS legislation didn't pass until well into 1986, and it took effect January 1st of 87. So all of you who have service when you were hired, just like this person was, between 84 and 87, that civil service interim time became part of your FERS career. So as long as they weren't a temporary employee or a seasonal employee, they should be able to plan to retire from that first date of being hired. So that interim time does still count. But to be totally sure, just to be sure that it wasn't subject to a deposit or might not have been temporary service, check with your HR office and have them run you a retirement estimate just to be sure that you're on the same page as your agency is in determining when you're eligible to retire, just to be sure.
Okay. Here's someone who says, I am at minimum retirement age in November and taking a deferred retirement. My husband is 64 and retiring next year. I have always been covered under FEHBP. Will I continue to be eligible to stay with FEHBP? And what if he dies before me?
Okay. Did it say that the husband was also federal or not?
Doesn't specify.
Doesn't say. Okay, well, it sounds like this writer is at least at the minimum retirement age, which would make her probably 56 right now. And I'm thinking, because she didn't give all the details, that she has at least 10 years of service. So she is eligible to retire, and sounds like she's planning to do so. So as long as she collects an immediate retirement, although it might be reduced depending on how much service she has, she can continue her health benefits and maintain it the rest of her life and cover her spouse if that's what she wants to do. On the other hand, if she delays her retirement or defers it, she's going to also be delaying her health insurance. So sometimes people who don't have a lot of federal service will basically resign at their minimum retirement age and then collect the benefit at 60 or 62, which means that's when you would reinstate your insurance. So there's a few details there that I'm not sure how to answer it because a little bit's left out, but I think that's what she was asking.
All right. Here's one where it is clear that both people work for the government.
Okay.
My husband and I both work for the federal government. Is there a way to adjust the survivor benefit to make it not so costly since one party makes more money than the other at retirement?
Yeah, I know. When you look at the reduction to your retirement to provide the maximum spousal survivor benefit, it's a 10% reduction. And there are only 10% in your retirement, so I can sympathize with the fact that that reduction is going to be pretty significant. But also keep in mind the other side of the coin, that if you were to predecease your spouse, leaving that survivor benefit gives them at least some replacement of your retirement if that were to suddenly end. So it's not even the full amount. It might only be 50% if you're under FERS is what they would receive. So it's a high price to pay, but it's also a very valuable benefit. So don't just focus on the cost of it, also focus on the value of it, because it can be just as valuable as it is costly. And keep in mind it does reduce your taxable income, so it's not quite as expensive as it looks because you're not paying tax on that money. And also if your spouse predeceases you, I mentioned this before, you can restore your annuity to the unreduced amount. So if one dies before the other, then all bets are off. You can change the election. In fact, that's true also. We did an article just recently on this, Tom, where we talked about changes that can be made after retirement. Mm-hmm. So any life event, let OPM know, let the TSP know, whether it's a marriage, a death, a divorce. Those are things that can change your elections you made when you first retired.
Yeah, and you can find that column on the homepage of GovExec.com. Here's a FERS-related question. Does switching to part-time work, not phased retirement, have any impact on a FERS employee's high 3 average salary?
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, we do have a lot of employees. We have now these flexible work schedules where employees can work sometimes, not everybody, but some can work part-time. Now, for retirement purposes, you can still retire when you had planned. So you could have a real simple example where somebody might have 30 years of service, but they only work 20 hours a week part-time. They would still be considered having 30 years of service. Their high 3 average would still be their full-time pay rates. So the first thing we would do to calculate that retirement is treat it as if they were full-time. And then we prorate it. So then we would add up the hours that they actually worked, divide that by the hours that they could have worked if they had been full-time, and you get a percentage. So in that simple example I just said, you would get 50% of the full retirement. But if you only had part-time service for maybe 2 years out of 30, then the percentage might be more like 98%. So if you've ever worked part-time, you'll notice when you get your retirement estimated, there will be this proration factor that shows what percentage of a full-time career did you actually perform. That's how they do it.
Okay.
That's fair, but it's a little complicated.
Yes, as these things tend to get in government, right?
Unfortunately, they do, yes.
Here's one from someone who says, I'm an employee covered by CSRS offset. I had a break in service and worked many years in the private sector, but started my VA career in 1980. So will my CSRS pension start to be offset at age 62 automatically?
Yeah, so we do have quite a number of employees who are covered under this program called Civil Service Offset. And usually it's because of just what that writer said. They had a break in service, they left before we had this change in retirement system. They came back after 1983 and found out they now have to pay into Social Security. So technically they're still CSRS employees, but they're paying fully into the FICA tax. So when they retire, they'll get the full civil service calculation like anybody else under the old system, but when they turn 62, just like she or he said, their civil service benefit gets offset. And it's going to be offset or reduced by the amount of Social Security that they earned during those years that they came back to federal service. So she'll, or he'll, whoever that is, will get more from Social Security than what they'll lose from the offset. But they will still have the offset kick in at 62 unless they're still working in government service at that point. Then it will happen when they retire.
Okay. Here's one that touches on the relationship between FERS and CSRS. I switched to FERS from CSRS in 1999. I will end up with about 20 years under CSRS and the remaining time, 24 years, under FERS. How is my retirement computed, especially now that sick leave is taken into consideration?
So if I add that up, that sounds like 44 years. That was a smart move. Yeah, it was a smart move without even knowing about it. Because what they did was they switched with 20 years, so that portion's going to be computed under the old system rules. And 20 years gives you about 36%. Now they've got 22, 24 years, whatever they said, under FERS by the time they
24.
retire, 24. And I would think with that much service, they might even be over 62 when they retire. So those 24 years under FERS will be worth 1.1% a year, so that's another 26%. So add 26 plus 36, and you got a benefit that's doing pretty good. So they're going to have a very nice retirement in the end of the game, but they'll have a hybrid. They'll have part of it computed under civil service, part under FERS, but the nice thing is the high 3 is still the final high 3. So we don't have to go back to 1999 to compute their salary. So that was a smart move, and they probably didn't realize it at the time.
So now you know why Tammy makes a living doing this, because she can do that kind of calculation right off the top of her head.
I may have done it wrong. So you know me with numbers. I need to get my calculator out. But you got the idea. It was generalization there.
Here's a health insurance related question. I'm retired and my husband will be retiring in 2 years. He is currently on my health insurance. I will be eligible for Medicaid in 4 years and he will be in 6. He is also eligible for TRICARE based on his military service. What are our options?
Oh, geez. Well, at least they're not lacking of health insurance, right? So we've got, sounds like federal health insurance. And again, she didn't mention if her husband's federal or not. I know he's military because he has TRICARE. TRICARE is military health insurance. So what I'm assuming is that they're going to have all three, Medicare, TRICARE, and FEHB. So once they're retired, the federal health plan can be suspended because of the TRICARE, meaning you don't need all three. So once you have Medicare and TRICARE, that is your insurance, and that's very good coverage. It has prescription benefits through TRICARE. The combination of TRICARE and Medicare is going to be pretty close to 100% medical coverage. So they could, at that point, suspend the federal. As long as she takes that federal plan into retirement, she'll be able to suspend it once they're both 65. And I didn't say cancel it, because you never know. You know, down the road, something with TRICARE might change, something with Medicare can change, and these are things that can change in the future. So keeping that federal plan suspended keeps it in your back pocket. You can cancel that suspension someday.
Yeah, if you do suspend it, you can get it back again
yes,
later?
During an open season, absolutely.
Okay. We're nearing the end of our allotted time, but I thought it would be good to ask a general question that came in earlier. It's hard to know what is enough. How do we calculate what we will need in order to be able to set a reasonable retirement goal?
Yeah, boy, there's been books written on that question. What is enough? And there's two sides of it, too. You'll hear some people say, well, you need 10 times your salary in savings to be able to retire comfortably. And then other people say, well, you don't have to save anything because you have a government pension. So you really have to figure out what's enough for you. And it's going to depend on what you spend in retirement. And that's maybe a hard thing for some of us to visualize, especially if we're still in the throes of maybe raising kids or paying for college or paying for a mortgage. So you want to think down the road, are you going to pay off that house? Will the kids be out of the house before you decide to retire? Some of those life-changing events can lower your out-of-pocket expenses. Sometimes that house can serve as an asset to help you fund a different retirement lifestyle. Maybe you're going to move to a lower cost of living area. So retirement planning is, again, financial planning. It's also mental preparation. You got to really visualize what that's going to look like for you. Are you someone who wants to retire and vacation in Aruba every year, or are you happy to paint on your back porch and do landscape painting where you just have to buy oil paints? So, you know, what kind of lifestyle are you really thinking of for yourself, and what's that going to cost? And so it's going to change for everybody.
Yeah, the short answer is it varies from person to person, right?
It sure does.
When you read these things that say you need to have $1 million saved in order to retire, it doesn't necessarily apply to everyone.
Some people will never have $1 million saved, and they'll still retire comfortably. Thank goodness, right?
Yes. And maybe we can end on this. With a lot of people facing retirement soon, and more people retiring all the time, OPM is trying to cut down on its backlog of retirement applications to be processed. What can people expect when they file that paperwork and say it's time for me to go?
Yeah, if you've done the homework, if you've done your pre-retirement planning, if you understand what it is that you're entitled to, everything's in your personnel folder, up to date and current, you've been working with your agency, and your agency, on the other hand, has been working with you, your retirement should go smoothly. That transition should be pretty seamless. And as you said, Tom, OPM is speeding up that process. They're down to processing 85% of retirement cases within 60 days. So in many cases today, employees aren't in special pay for more than 1 month. So they'll get their first interim check, and then the next month they get their full retirement check. But that means putting your application in early, requesting estimates well ahead of your retirement, being proactive if anything's missing from prior service records in your personnel folder, get that put back in place while you're still getting a paycheck. So there's things you can do to prepare. Many people are doing them.
Great. Well, we could go on all day like this, but we're reaching the end of our allotted time. So I want to thank you, Tammy, for joining us today and providing your wisdom, as you do every week on GovExec.com and in your National Institute for Transition Planning seminars. But please stay tuned. Constance Sayers of Government Executive will be talking to Joan Melanson of Long-Term Care Partners for a little more detail on this subject. Thanks.
Welcome back. Thanks to Tom and Tammy for that interesting discussion, and thanks to you, our viewers, for tuning in today. I'm Constance Sayers. I am the president of Government Executive Media Group, and I'm here with Joan Melanson, Director of Program Promotion at Long-Term Care Partners. Joan and I are going to continue our conversation on retirement readiness, but first a few words about Joan. Joan Melanson is the administrator of the Federal Long-Term Care Insurance Program and Benefits. She manages the outreach and educational activities of promoting and growing the Federal Long-Term Care Insurance Program, and she has since its launch. She works with federal agencies and affinity organizations, including active employees, retiree organizations, members of the uniformed services, and congressional staff. Her team and account managers and certified long-term care insurance consultants handle telephone calls and appointments, ensuring that callers get the information that they need to make an informed long-term care decision. So welcome, Joan.
It's very nice to be here.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
And let's get right to it. I understand that you provide educational outreach mostly to pre-retirees. Do the results of the survey that Tom and Tammy just talked about, did they surprise you?
Well, in fact, Connie, most of the federal employees that we talk to during our pre-retirement seminars and webinars have made really excellent progress on retirement, on their retirement planning. And that's because they're thinking about it. They're coming to webinars, they're coming to our seminars. But what's interesting, even if they've been working on their retirement plan, there's always more that they can do. At least that's their perception of it. And in conversation, they'll say things like, I wonder if I should think about long-term care or long-term care insurance. And typically, these are the folks that have had some experience with taking care of their parents, whether it be hands-on caregiving or whether they're paying for it. And they're thinking about that, and they're thinking about their retirement plans and projecting out 20 years into the future or 30 years, and they're thinking, should I be making a plan for that right now as part of my retirement plan?
So why is long-term care an important piece of the retirement planning puzzle?
Well, there are two aspects of it. There's what I call the financial piece of it and the caregiving piece of it. And the financial piece of it is, what would be the impact on my nest egg if I were to incur costs of long-term care? That's either for myself or my spouse, or maybe it's a parent or other family members, because with long-term care, families take care of families. It isn't just about the person itself or herself, himself or herself. So, you know, you have a nest egg and you've been saving for this your entire life. And you think about all the wonderful things that you're going to do with it for retirement. And, you know, it's about all the fun things. But it's also about having enough money between now and when you die. And so, you know, can you accommodate long-term care costs? The second piece of it is caregiving. And that has to do with what kind of support will you need if you were to need care. You know, where would it be? And who would be there to help you? And that's a very personal thing, because we all have different support systems. You might have a spouse, you might not. You might need care, he or she might need care. You might have siblings who could help out. You might have adult children. Oftentimes people say, I'm going to expect my adult children. Well, good luck to you. I'm not counting on my adult kids to take care of me. That might be payback from all those years of raising them. But you know, and that's a very personal thing. So two reasons, the financial aspect and the caregiving aspect.
And you and I have talked about this, which is that no one wants to talk about this. This is not an issue that a lot of folks want to talk about or can talk about easily. When the issue of long-term care comes up, how do you respond and what guidance do you provide?
Well, you're absolutely right. Nobody wants to talk about it. People stop by when we're at booths or conferences or health fairs or whatever, and as soon as they know I'm talking about long-term care, meaning, you know, you need assistance, whether it's hands-on assistance with eating, bathing, dressing, you have Alzheimer's or some other cognitive impairment, they step back like, I have leprosy, and they're going to get it if they even talk to me about it. You know, retirement, as I mentioned before, is about having fun. I've worked 30, 40 years of my life, and now I'm going to do the things I've always wanted to do. It's going to be, I've got a hobby, I've got free time for the first time in my life. I've got the financial resources to do that. I have time to spend with my spouse, with my kids, my grandkids. I'm just ready for it. And I have a lot of friends retiring now, and they're very excited about it. You know, they deserve it after working very hard. So the last thing that we're thinking about is long-term care. That's the icky factor. No one wants to talk about it. No one wants to deal with it. And yet it's a reality for many people as they get older. But I encourage people to have this conversation before the crisis happens. Because if you talk about it before, you can develop a plan, not when you're in a crisis situation. And that's what oftentimes will happen. And then nobody has any idea of what anybody's wishes are. Everyone's in crisis situation. The family comes together. Everybody has different ideas. And the bottom line is, it's chaotic. But again, to try to get people to talk about it and plan in advance before the crisis is very difficult. Because, you know, when you're in your 50s and your 60s, you're having a good time. And you're not thinking about what it would be like if I needed something 20 years in the future or 30 years. The average age of that people use long-term care insurance is in their early 70s, and that's way down in the distance for many people perceptually.
Well, that brings me to my last question, which, what age is the right age to plan for long-term care and purchase the insurance?
That's the same question as how much money am I going to need when I retire? And you know, it's that crystal ball that I carry with me so I can answer that question, so I can look in and say, okay, Connie, this is exactly when you're going to need it, for how long, and where you're going to need your care, and what your family situation looks like. I have no clue, and I wish I knew for myself, because the reality is it depends. It's the same answer that Tammy gave earlier. It depends on so many factors. And the problem with insurance is that you need to purchase it when you're younger. And we find that most feds who purchase it in their early 50s. They're going to those pre-retirement classes that Tammy talked about doing, that we offer through our webinars. They're thinking about retirement, but they're not thinking about long-term care. That's the last thing on their mind. That's when they should be purchasing it when they're in their early 50s. And why is that? It's because it's affordable, and also you need to be healthy. There are medical questions that you need to answer on the questionnaire. We also will get copies of your medical records. Now, you don't have to be a marathon runner. You don't have to be in excellent financial, an excellent health. But you can't be on the road to needing long-term care. You can't have been diagnosed with MS or Parkinson's or Alzheimer's or needing care right now. You have to be reasonably healthy, and that will be commensurate with the age at which you apply. But we do recommend that you look at this when you're younger and when you're healthy, because that will determine how much it will cost. If you wait until just before you need it, say you're close to 70, it's going to be astronomically expensive. If you look at it when you're younger, it is more affordable. And so we have a very comprehensive website at www.ltcfeds.com, because our mission at Long-Term Care Partners is to provide all the information we can to the federal family to develop a plan for long-term care. And I'm not saying that everybody needs or should purchase long-term care insurance. And if you decide that long-term care insurance is right for you, I'm not saying that the federal long-term care insurance plan is the right one. What I'm saying is that our website and our resources, our educational resources, whether they're the webinars, the seminars that we offer, we have an online consultant tool, we have a lot of calculators on our website, that will help you decide how to make the right plan for you. And that's going to depend upon what's your financial situation, what's your support situation family-wise, what's your view towards risk, what's your health, what's your family's health, so many considerations. And so what I suggest is do the research while you're young, while you're doing your plan, and make the decision that's right for you.
Joan, thank you so much for joining us today and for your insights. And thanks to you, our viewers, for joining us today. If you would like to view this event again, or you'd like to share it with your colleagues, it will remain on our website for 3 months. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.